The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland like a creature in pain. Marcus Reed pressed his gloved hand against the frost-covered window of Station Hyperion. Watching sheets of snow dance violently across the endless white, the Arctic Circle in winter was a place where the world forgot itself, where darkness reigned for months, and the only companions were howling winds and the distant shimmer of aurora lights that painted the sky in ethereal greens and purples. Inside the communications room, banks of monitors cast a bluish glow across his weathered face. At 34, Marcus had chosen isolation over connection, preferring the company of radio waves and satellite feeds to the messy complications of human relationships. His last assignment had ended badly, a failed romance with a colleague that left him seeking the emptiest corner of Earth he could find. The solar storm had been building for days. NASA had issued warnings about disrupted communications, but Marcus welcomed the chaos. There was something honest about electromagnetic interference, something pure about natural forces that required no explanation or apology. He adjusted the frequency dial on his main receiver, listening to the static crackle and pop like burning wood. Then he heard it, a pattern within the chaos. 3 ascending tones, a pause, then 2 descending notes. It repeated, growing stronger, more insistent. Marcus leaned forward, his pulse quickening. This was not random interference. This was deliberate. This was a message. His fingers flew across the keyboard, triangulating the source. The signal originated from somewhere close, impossibly close, perhaps 10 kilometers to the northeast. He activated the station's external cameras, cycling through the feeds until one caught movement against the white landscape. Something was falling from the sky. Not falling. It's crashing. A streak of blue-white light tore through the storm clouds, trailing sparks and smoke. The object tumbled end over end before slamming into a snowbank beyond the perimeter fence. The impact sent a shockwave that rattled the station's walls and knocked a coffee mug from Marcus's desk. For 3 heartbeats. He stood frozen. Every protocol screamed at him to contact headquarters, to wait for official response teams to follow procedure. But something deeper pulled at him, something primal and urgent that bypassed logic entirely. He grabbed his thermal suit and emergency medical kit and stepped into the airlock. The moment the outer door opened, the cold hit him like a physical blow. Negative 40 degrees Celsius made worse by wind that cut through layers of insulation like razors. He activated his headlamp and pushed forward into the storm. The crash site glowed faintly in the darkness. As Marcus approached, he saw the wreckage was unlike any aircraft he recognized. The hull curved in ways that defied conventional aerodynamics, made from a metal that shimmered with an inner light despite being half buried in snow and ice. Sections had peeled away from the impact, revealing an interior that pulsed with fading luminescence. Then he saw her. She lay crumpled against a snowdrift, her body partially covered by debris. At first glance, she appeared human, but as Marcus drew closer, the differences became apparent. Her skin held a faint pearlescent quality, like moonlight given form. Her hair spread across the white snow, shifted between silver and deep violet, depending on the angle of his headlamp. She wore a suit of the same strange metal as her ship, torn and sparking at the seams. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, medical training overriding shock. He pressed 2 fingers against her throat, searching for a pulse. Her skin was warm, far warmer than it should be in this frozen hell. And beneath his touch he felt a rhythm. Though it beat in patterns unlike any human heart. Her eyes opened. They were the color of amber held up to flame. Gold and orange swirling with depths that seemed impossible. She looked at him with an expression that cycled through pain, fear, and something else. Something that hit Marcus in the chest like a physical force. Recognition, though they had never met. Connection, though they were different species. She reached up with trembling fingers and touched his face through his frost-covered mask. Her lips moved, forming words in a language that sounded like music played on crystal instruments. He understood nothing, yet everything. She needed help. She was alone. She was afraid. Marcus made his decision in an instant. He carefully gathered her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt despite her height nearly matching his own. She curled against his chest, her warmth seeping through his thermal layers. And together they began the brutal journey back to the station. The storm fought them every step. Wind threatened to knock Marcus off his feet, and snow stung any exposed skin like angry bees. But he held her close, this impossible visitor from beyond the stars, and pushed forward through the white chaos. Her breathing grew shallow against his shoulder, and he quickened his pace, fear lending him strength. When the station's lights finally appeared through the blizzard, Marcus felt relief so intense it nearly brought him to his knees. He staggered through the airlock, ice cracking off his suit as warmth flooded over them. He carried her directly to the medical bay, a small room equipped to handle basic emergencies, but never intended for anything like this. He laid her gently on the examination table, carefully began removing the damaged sections of her suit. Beneath her body was both alien and achingly familiar. The same basic structure as a human, yet refined in ways that suggested evolution along a different path. Her wounds leaked a fluid that glowed faintly blue, and Marcus worked quickly to clean and seal them with medical adhesive, hoping human treatments would not harm her further as he worked. She watched him with those impossible amber eyes. Once, she reached out and caught his wrist, holding it gently. She spoke again in her musical language, and though Marcus still could not understand the words, the meaning resonated in his chest like a tuning fork, struck in the center of his being. Thank you. Trust, connection, he found himself, smiling despite the impossible situation. Despite the fact that he had just rescued an alien from a crashed spacecraft, despite the fact that every regulation he had ever been taught told him this was beyond his authority to handle alone. In that moment, looking into her eyes, Marcus felt less alone than he had in years. She drifted into unconscious rest, her breathing evening out into a steady rhythm. Marcus pulled a thermal blanket over her and settled into a chair beside the table, unwilling to leave her alone. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the frozen world. But inside the medical bay, something new had begun. Something that would change everything Marcus thought he knew about loneliness, about connection, and about the vast universe that had suddenly become far more intimate than he ever imagined possible. Dawn came late to the Arctic, a gradual lightening of darkness rather than true sunrise. Marcus woke with a start in the chair beside the medical table, his neck stiff from an awkward sleeping position. The alien woman still lay beneath the thermal blanket, but her eyes were open. Tracking his movement with curious intensity, he stood slowly, not wanting to startle her, and checked the monitors he had jury-rigged to track her vital signs. Her heart rate, if that was what the steady triple rhythm indicated, had stabilized. The wounds he had sealed showed signs of healing far faster than any human injury would have recovered. Whatever her physiology, it was remarkably resilient. She sat up carefully, testing her limbs with methodical precision. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, revealing the emergency medical wrap Marcus had applied during the night. Her gaze moved around the room, absorbing every detail before returning to settle on him with unnerving focus. Marcus gestured to himself. "Marcus," he said clearly, tapping his chest. "I'm Marcus." She tilted her head, considering. Then she touched her own chest, and spoke a word that sounded like wind chimes and distant thunder combined. "Zara," he smiled despite himself. "Zara," he repeated. And the way her expression brightened told him he had gotten close enough to the correct pronunciation. They spent the next hour in a halting dance of communication. Marcus brought her water, which she examined with scientific curiosity before drinking. He offered protein bars from the station's supplies, and she nibbled cautiously, her face cycling through expressions as she processed unfamiliar tastes. Through gestures and careful repetition, they began building a vocabulary of understanding. But it was when Zara reached out and took his hand that communication transcended words entirely. The moment their skin made direct contact, Marcus felt a rush of impressions flood through him. Not thoughts exactly, but emotions rendered in such vivid clarity that they might as well have been images. He felt her fear during the crash, her pain from the injuries, her relief at finding someone who did not flee in terror, and beneath it all, something else. A warm current of curiosity and attraction that made his breath catch in his throat. Zara's eyes widened, and Marcus realized she was feeling the same connection from his side. His loneliness, carefully buried under layers of professional detachment, now laid bare. His wonder at her existence, mixing with an attraction that felt both absurd and inevitable. She squeezed his hand gently, and a sense of acceptance flowed between them that needed no translation. Over the following days, they developed their unique language. Touch became the primary conduit, but they supplemented it with sketches. With music from Marcus's collection, with the mathematical symbols that apparently transcended cultural boundaries, Zara proved remarkably quick at grasping concepts, and Marcus found himself looking forward to each new discovery they made together. On the third night, as aurora lights painted the sky in brilliant curtains of green and violet, Marcus brought Zara to the observation dome. She had recovered enough to walk, though she still moved with careful deliberation. The moment she saw the lights dancing overhead, she gasped, a sound of pure joy that needed no translation. She pressed her hands against the dome's curved glass, and Marcus stood beside her, their shoulders touching. Through the contact, he felt her emotions washing over him. Wonder at Earth's natural beauty, sadness at being separated from her home, and something warmer, something that made his pulse quicken when her hand found his in the darkness. Zara turned to face him fully, and in the shifting aurora light, her features seemed to glow from within. She brought his hand to her chest, letting him feel the triple rhythm of her heart beating faster. Then she pressed her other hand over his heart, feeling its singular, steady thunder. Different rhythms, her expression seemed to say, but harmonizing. Marcus felt the truth of it resonate through him. Despite the impossibility, despite every rational objection his scientific mind could raise, something profound connected them. She touched his face with gentle fingers, tracing the line of his jaw, and he found himself leaning into the contact. When she spoke, her voice carried a reverent quality. She said 2 words in her language, then paused, searching for translation. Her fingers moved across his temple, and through their connection, Marcus understood. Kindred star, the concept flooded into him with crystalline clarity. In her culture, souls were born from the same cosmic event, scattered across the universe, searching for their counterpart. A kindred star was more than a soulmate. It was the other half of one's fundamental essence, completion of a circuit that had been open since birth. She was saying she recognized him, that somehow, across impossible distances and against all probability, they had found each other. Marcus should have pulled away, should have maintained professional distance, should have remembered that she was an alien, that this was first contact, that protocols existed for good reasons. But standing in the aurora light with her hand over his heart and her emotions flowing into him like music, all those objections crumbled into dust. He cupped her face gently, marveling at the warmth of her skin, and she leaned into his palm with a sound that vibrated with contentment. They stood like that for a long moment, the universe wheeling overhead. 2 beings from different worlds discovering they spoke the same language where it mattered most. Then Zara's expression shifted, happiness giving way to concern. She pulled back slightly and pressed both hands to his temples, channeling a more complex series of impressions. Marcus focused, trying to parse the message. Sister, twin, separated, searching. His eyes widened. You have a sister? She was with you in the crash. Zara nodded vigorously, then gestured to the sky and made a motion indicating distance. Not here, somewhere else. The crash had separated them, and Zara had been trying to locate her twin since awakening. Marcus immediately moved to the communications panel he had set up in the dome. We'll find her, he said firmly. If she's broadcasting any kind of signal, I can track it. He began cycling through frequencies while Zara watched with intense hope radiating from her. Hours passed as they worked together, Zara pointing out subtle patterns in the static that Marcus's human ears could not distinguish. Just as frustration began to set in, a new signal emerged from the noise. The same 3 ascending tones Zara's ship had broadcast, but stronger, closer. Marcus triangulated quickly. She's maybe 20 kilometers south. Moving this direction, Zara's relief hit him like a wave, so powerful it nearly staggered him. But mixed with the relief was something else, something complicated. Through their link, Marcus felt anticipation colored with concern. As if Zara was both desperate to see her sister and worried about what would happen when they were reunited, she took his hand again and channeled a final message. This one tinged with warning and something that felt almost like apology. Twin bonds cannot separate. What one claims, both must share. Marcus did not fully understand. But before he could ask for clarification, a new sound cut through the night. The sharp crack of atmosphere being displaced, the hum of advanced engines. Through the dome's glass, a second craft descended from the storm clouds. Smaller than Zara's ship had been, more of a rescue pod than a vessel. It landed smoothly in the snow beyond the station, and a hatch hissed open. The figure that emerged was identical to Zara in height and build. But where Zara moved with gentle curiosity, this newcomer carried herself with coiled intensity. Her hair was darker, shifting between deep purple and black, and even from a distance, Marcus could sense the difference in presence. Zara squeezed his hand tightly. Her emotions a complex tangle of joy and trepidation. Her sister had arrived, and somehow, Marcus knew with certainty that nothing would ever be simple again. The woman who entered the station moved like lightning given form. She swept through the airlock with economical grace, her gaze immediately locking onto Zara with an intensity that made the air feel charged. For a moment, the sisters simply stared at each other across the observation dome. Marcus felt like an intruder witnessing something sacred. Then they collided in an embrace that seemed to generate its own light. They held each other tightly, foreheads pressed together, hands gripping shoulders, as if to confirm the other was truly solid and real. A sound like singing filled the air, though neither opened their mouth, some form of communication beyond Marcus's ability to perceive. When they finally separated, the newcomer's attention snapped to Marcus with the precision of a targeting laser. Her eyes were the same amber as Zara's, but burned with a fiercer flame. She crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. And before Marcus could react, she gripped his face with both hands. The connection hit him like diving into ice water. Where Zara's touch was gentle warmth, her sister's presence crashed through his defenses with overwhelming force. She rifled through his recent memories with casual efficiency, saw every moment he had shared with Zara, felt every emotion he had experienced. Marcus gasped at the invasion, but found he could not pull away. Then, just as abruptly, she released him. She stepped back, studying him with an expression that cycled through surprise, calculation, and something that might have been approval. She spoke in the same musical language as Zara, but her voice carried sharper edges, like crystal striking crystal. Zara moved to Marcus's side, taking his hand defensively. She spoke rapidly to her sister, and even without understanding the words, Marcus heard the protective note in her tone. The sister's expression softened slightly, and when she responded, her voice held less intensity. She touched her own chest and spoke, a name that sounded like distant storm clouds rolling across a metal sky. "Nix Marcus," he managed, finding his voice. "I'm Marcus." Nix's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. She looked between Marcus and her sister, taking in their clasped hands, the way Zara leaned subtly toward him. Then she spoke again. This time she made an effort to channel her. Meaning through touch, she placed one hand on Zara's shoulder and reached toward Marcus with the other. He hesitated only a moment before accepting the contact. Her message flooded through him with crystal clarity. She recognized what Zara had found in him: a kindred star, a soul match that transcended physical differences. In her culture, such connections were treasured above all else, considered sacred gifts from the cosmos itself. Nix was not angry that her sister had bonded with an alien. She was protective of that bond, fiercely so. But the next part of her message made Marcus's stomach tighten. In their culture, twin sisters shared everything. Not from obligation, but from fundamental nature. They were born as one consciousness split between 2 bodies, forever linked. Where one went, the other followed. What one loved, the other could not help but love as well. If Zara claimed Marcus as her kindred star, then Nix was bound to that claim. Not as an intrusion, but as a natural extension of their twin connection. Marcus looked at Zara, searching her face for confirmation. She met his gaze steadily, and through their link, he felt the truth of it. This was what she had tried to warn him about. This was why concern had mixed with her relief at her sister's arrival. "Both of you," he said slowly, testing the reality aloud. "You're saying I'm connected to both of you." Nyx moved closer, her presence less overwhelming now, but still intense. She touched his chest lightly, just over his heart, and sent another message. She had not expected to feel drawn to him herself. She had come prepared to simply protect her sister's choice. But the moment she touched him, the moment she felt his essence, the connection had sparked for her as well. Different from Zara's bond, but no less real. Where Zara had found his gentleness, his wonder, his capacity for patience, Nyx resonated with his hidden fire. His courage in the face of the unknown, the reckless streak he thought he had left behind years ago. Marcus stepped back, needing space to process. This was beyond anything he had prepared for. He had barely wrapped his mind around one alien woman calling him her soulmate. Now her identical twin was making a similar claim. Every logical part of his brain screamed that this was impossible, that he should contact headquarters, that he was in far over his head. But when he looked at them standing side by side in the aurora light, both watching him with those impossible amber eyes, his heart spoke louder than logic. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself that isolation was preferable to the risk of connection. These two beings had crashed into his frozen world and ignited something he thought had died years ago, the possibility of belonging, of being truly seen and accepted. "This is insane," he said, but he was smiling despite himself. Nyx's expression flickered with approval, and Zara's relief washed over him like warm sunlight. They moved toward him simultaneously, flanking him on either side. And when they each took one of his hands, the connection between the three of them blazed into brilliant life. It was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Through Zara, he felt calm acceptance and gentle joy. Through Nyx, fierce protectiveness and challenging excitement. And beneath both, a harmonic resonance that suggested the sisters were sharing their connection to him between themselves, creating a circuit of emotion and understanding that flowed in a continuous loop. Zara leaned her head against his shoulder, and Nyx traced patterns on his palm with one finger, each touch sending ripples of sensation through their link. They stood together in the observation dome as the aurora lights danced overhead. Three beings from different worlds, discovering that the universe was far stranger and more beautiful than any of them had imagined. "Your ship," Marcus said eventually, forcing himself to think practically. "Can it be repaired?" Nyx straightened, and through their connection, Marcus felt her shift into a more analytical mode. She explained through layered impressions that her pod was functional, but lacked the range for their journey home. Zara's vessel was more powerful, but badly damaged. However, with time and materials from the station, they believed they could combine components to create something flight-worthy. "How much time?" Marcus asked. The sisters exchanged a glance, communicating in that silent way twins possessed across all species. Then Zara held up 4 fingers. "For days." They had 4 days before the window for their return journey closed, before the orbital mechanics that had brought them to Earth shifted beyond recovery, for days to repair their ship and decide what would happen next, for days for Marcus to choose between the life he had known and something completely unknown. Nyx squeezed his hand, drawing his attention. Through their link, she posed a question that was not really a question, more of a challenge, a test, to see what he was made of. Would he help them repair their ship, knowing it might take them away? Or would he sabotage their efforts to keep them here? Marcus met her fierce gaze steadily. "I'll help you," he said firmly. "Whatever you need. If you choose to leave, I won't be the reason you can't." Approval blazed through Nyx's connection, respect mixing with something warmer. Zara's emotions swelled with affection so pure it made Marcus's throat tight. But," he added, his voice dropping lower, "if you decide to go, I want these 4 days. I want to know you both." "Really know you?" The sisters looked at each other, that silent communication passing between them again. When they turned back to Marcus, both were smiling, and the promise in their expressions made his pulse race. Zara spoke first, her fingers tracing along his jaw. Through touch, she sent a message of agreement and desire. She wanted to know him too, to explore this impossible connection in whatever time they had. Nyx's message carried similar intent, but with characteristic intensity. She wanted to test the limits of their bond, to see if a human could truly handle what they offered. To discover if this connection was as profound as it felt, or merely the novelty of first contact. Marcus found himself grinning despite the enormity of what they were proposing. For days, 4 days trapped in an Arctic station with 2 alien women who claimed to be his soulmates. While repairing their spaceship and trying not to think about the impossible choice waiting at the end. "All right," he said, pulling them both closer. "Let's make them count." Outside, the storm continued its assault on the frozen world. But inside Station Hyperion, warmth was building that no blizzard could touch. 3 hearts beating in different rhythms, beginning to find their harmony. For days before everything changed, in Marcus, who had sought isolation to escape the pain of human connection, now found himself standing at the center of something vast and terrifying and more alive than anything he had ever known. The first day passed in a blur of salvage and discovery. Marcus helped the sisters drag usable components from Zara's crashed ship, working in shifts to brave the brutal cold outside. Nyx proved to be a brilliant engineer, her hands moving with confident precision as she identified systems that could be integrated with her rescue pod. Zara served as the bridge between alien technology and human understanding, translating concepts through touch and improvised diagrams, but it was the nights that transformed everything. After exhausting work sessions, they would retreat to the station's common area. A small room Marcus had made comfortable with salvaged furniture and soft lighting. The sisters were fascinated by human customs, and Marcus found himself explaining everything from the purpose of hot showers to the social rituals around shared meals. On the second night, as they sat together on the worn couch watching archived footage of Earth's oceans, Nyx suddenly asked, "Why alone?" Her English was improving rapidly, absorbing patterns from Marcus's speech with uncanny speed, but she still relied on touch to convey complex meaning. And now she pressed her palm to his temple, questioning why he had chosen isolation. Marcus hesitated, then decided they deserved honesty. Through their connection, he shared memories he had buried deep, a relationship that had ended in betrayal, a partner who had used his trust as a weapon, who had made him feel foolish for believing in connection at all. He showed them the moment he had requested transfer to the most remote station available. Choosing frozen emptiness over risking that pain again, Zara's response was immediate, her emotions flooding him with protective warmth. She moved closer, wrapping her arms around him from one side. Nyx surprised him by mirroring the gesture from the other, her usual intensity softening into something gentler. "Not foolish," Nyx said fiercely. "Brave. To trust is brave." Through their link, the sisters showed him something from their own past. A time when they had been separated by circumstances beyond their control, each believing the other lost forever. The agony of that disconnection, the fundamental wrongness of being severed from one's twin, and the overwhelming joy of their eventual reunion, which had taught them that pain was the price of love. The price was always worth paying. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks before realizing he was crying, not from sadness, but from the relief of being understood, of having his deepest wound acknowledged and not dismissed. Zara wiped his tears gently, and Nyx pressed her forehead to his in a gesture he had learned meant trust and intimacy in their culture. They stayed like that for a long time. 3 beings tangled together on a worn couch at the edge of the world, sharing warmth against the dark. On the 3rd day, the repair work reached a critical phase. They needed to test whether the hybrid engine they had created could actually achieve escape velocity. The procedure was complex and would require all 3 of them. Working in perfect coordination, Marcus found himself in the pilot seat of Nyx's pod. Following her instructions as she called out commands in a mixture of her language and broken English, Zara monitored systems from outside, relaying information through their mental link with a precision that amazed him. When the engine ignited, The power surge nearly overwhelmed him. The pod lifted 3 meters off the ground, hovering steady despite the storm winds. Through their connection, Marcus felt Nyx's fierce pride and Zara's analytical satisfaction. They had done it. The ship would fly. But as the reality settled over him, so did a crushing weight. Tomorrow was the 4th day. Tomorrow, they would have to decide. That night, none of them pretended to sleep. They gathered in the observation dome, the aurora lights painting them in shades of green and gold. For a long time, nobody spoke, each lost in thoughts too heavy for words. Finally, Zara broke the silence. She took Marcus's hand and sent him a message of pure emotion. She did not want to leave. The thought of returning to her world, of never seeing him again, felt like tearing out a piece of her soul. But she also showed him images of her home, a place of soaring crystal cities and twin suns that danced at dawn. She had responsibilities there, research that had been her life's work. People who depended on her. Nyx's contribution was characteristically more complex. She showed Marcus that she could feel her sister's conflict as if it were her own. For twins of their species, separation was possible, but agonizing. If Zara stayed, Nyx would have to as well, or they would both suffer. But their home called to Nyx as strongly as it called to Zara. Duty and love pulling in opposite directions. Then she sent him a question that took his breath away. Would he consider coming with them? Leaving Earth? Leaving everything he knew? To journey into the unknown with 2 alien women he had known for only 4 days? Marcus stood and moved to the dome's glass, pressing his palms against the cold surface. Behind him, he felt the sisters' attention, like physical weight. How could he answer? Everything rational said this was madness. He had a life here, responsibilities, a species that needed him to report this contact properly. But what kind of life had he really been living? Hiding in the Arctic, running from connection, convincing himself that loneliness was safer than risk? He turned to face them, and the words came before he could stop them. What would I do there? On your world. Zara stood and moved to him, excitement sparking through their link. She showed him images of their research facilities, of scientific mysteries that would take lifetimes to unravel. Places where a human perspective might offer insights no one had considered. A role for him, not as a curiosity, but as a valued partner in discovery. Nyx joined them, her hand finding his other side. She showed him something different. Adventures, waiting in the spaces between stars. Her message carried challenge and promise in equal measure. Life with them would never be simple or safe, but it would never be boring either. Marcus looked between them, these 2 impossible women who had crashed into his isolation and set his world ablaze. In their eyes, he saw his own reflection, and for the first time in years, he recognized the person looking back. Not the lonely researcher hiding from pain, but someone capable of extraordinary courage. Someone worthy of being chosen. If I come with you, he said slowly, there's no going back, is there? Earth would be light years away. I would never see it again. Both sisters nodded, not hiding the truth. This was a choice that could not be unmade. Marcus closed his eyes and thought of everything he would leave behind. His small apartment in a city he barely remembered. Colleagues who were professional acquaintances more than friends. A family who had given up trying to understand his need for distance. A world that had always felt like it was behind thick glass, visible but somehow unreachable. Then he thought of what he would gain. The bond humming between the 3 of them, growing stronger each day. The promise of belonging so complete that distance and difference meant nothing. 2 women, alien and impossible and perfect, who had chosen him out of all the universe. When he opened his eyes, he was smiling through tears. Then let's not go back, he said. Let's go forward. The sisters' joy crashed over him like a wave, so intense it drove him to his knees. They caught him, held him, their emotions blending with his, until he could not tell where he ended and they began. Zara was laughing and crying simultaneously, and even Nyx's fierce composure cracked to reveal something vulnerable and beautiful. They held each other under the dancing lights. 3 hearts making a choice that would echo across stars. Tomorrow, they would finish the repairs. Tomorrow, they would point their ship toward the sky and leave this frozen world behind. But tonight, they had this moment. This perfect convergence of souls that had found each other against impossible odds. Marcus pulled back just enough to look at them both, memorizing their faces in the aurora glow. "Show me," he whispered. "Show me everything. Your world, your lives, everything I'm choosing." The sisters exchanged a glance, then pressed their hands to his temples simultaneously. The connection blazed into brilliant life. And suddenly, Marcus was seeing through their eyes. Crystal cities that grew like living things. Twin suns rising over oceans that sang with bioluminescent life. Libraries of knowledge accumulated over millennia. Festivals where entire populations joined in mental harmony. Dangers they would face together. Adventures waiting in the uncharted regions of space. And through it all, the unshakable certainty that wherever they went, whatever they faced, they would face it together. 3 instead of 1. Stronger for their differences, unbreakable in their unity. When the vision faded, Marcus found himself breathless and overwhelmed. Zara kissed his forehead gently, and Nyx cupped his face with unexpected tenderness. "Tomorrow?" Zara asked, her English still accented but clear. Marcus smiled and pulled them both close. "Tomorrow, we fly." The final day arrived with deceptive calm. The storm that had raged since Marcus's first detected the sisters' signal finally broke, leaving the Arctic landscape crystalline and still under a sky scattered with stars. They worked through the morning and afternoon, making final adjustments to the hybrid ship, checking and rechecking systems that would carry them beyond Earth's gravity. Marcus found himself moving through the station as if seeing it for the first time and the last time simultaneously. Every corner held memories now, moments shared with Zara and Nyx that had transformed this cold prison into something precious. The medical bay where he had first tended Zara's wounds. The observation dome where they had watched Aurora's dance. The common room where they had shared stories and slowly built a language of understanding. By evening, everything was ready. The ship sat in the clearing, sleek and strange, a marriage of alien technology and human ingenuity. It would fly. They had confirmed that much. Whether it would survive the journey to the sisters' home system was another question, but one they had all agreed was worth answering together.